This is the Texas Land Guys podcast, hosted by brothers Tim Dosch and Tom Dosch. With their partners David Marshall and Trip Rich, they have built DMRE, the leading land brokerage in Texas. With decades of experience brokering deals between landowners and real estate developers, they take you inside the deals that move the market.
All right, well, welcome to the podcast. This is part 2 of our interview with Jason Baker. This was a really fun one for Tim and I. We have been friends with Jason for a long time, and it goes back, decades at this point. We've gotten to share a lot of life together beyond just business. We've traveled internationally. He actually officiated 2 of the weddings for our sisters, and so it's pretty fun to sit down with him. And we've always gleaned a lot of wisdom from Jason. Tim, I know you talked about last week how we've consistently gone to Jason for advice, whether that was, should we start our own company? What should we do during COVID? You know, he's someone that we've gone to, and not even just on the business side, but advice for, our marriages, parenting, and even just work with different nonprofits.
No, absolutely. It's been a great relationship and a lot of wisdom. I love this second episode that we're about to air. There's a lot of wisdom here, and I found myself as we were recording this and even asking questions to Jason and getting his response, wanting to go back and re-listen to take some notes, because I think there's some things for me that were very impactful that I want to apply to my life and my family and marriage and being a father, and just a really, I think, healthy perspective. He's had a lot of experience over the years and a lot of humility with Jason, but also just a lot of boldness and strength that you'll see come through in this episode. So really encourage everyone to listen, and there's still some good business tips in here as well in this segment, but it's a lot more on the personal side of what drives him. And I think just in closing, as we get ready to listen to this podcast, what Tom and I talk a lot about is you have to have something beyond the business that drives you and motivates you, because at some point just getting another deal or making more money can get very empty. And so I think you're going to hear that with Jason talking about what is it beyond the business, even though he's still very successful and very engaged in the business and cares about his success with it.
Yeah, you're going to hear someone speak, but not just speak from a philosophical standpoint. Jason really lives this out, and we've seen that just being friends with him for a long time now. So enjoy this second part. Jason, you really have a legacy in your family, like you said, of your dad being in the business. Sounds like Kenneth's dad being an attorney. What are some of the things that you learned growing up? I mean, did you know you wanted to be in real estate, that's what you wanted to do? Or what was that journey like? And you didn't actually work for your dad. You went and worked. Was Wolf your first job out of school in the real estate world?
Yeah. Yeah, it was my first job. And I think Kenneth and I, we've talked about this over the years. I think we both kind of having grown up in and around the business, although in 2 different parts of the business, I think we both thought that this would be something we would do. It is incredible when I think back on 25 plus years ago and coming out of college and starting with Ed, how little I knew about the industry and how little I understood about tenant rep. I mean, I really didn't know anything about it, or a lot less than I probably should have. It turns out that everything's okay. But I think we both kind of grew up and around it. And I think all through college and at least in my head, it was, I'll probably get in the real estate business. And I think Kenneth was the same way.
And your dad would have been through the 80s and through some different cycles. I mean, is there things that you learned from that growing up, or not as much?
No, for sure. My dad was, I would describe his career as one that was very successful. But I would describe his career of him having kind of gone through the business as more of a generalist. He did a little bit of retail. He did a fair amount of office. He even dabbled a little bit in industrial, very little. But I would say there was not one product type that he was super focused on. He served on a number of boards. He invested in other businesses. He had a billboard company. He owned a laboratory. I mean, my dad is a serial entrepreneur. I mean, he really is. And it manifests itself, at least through him, primarily through real estate. But he was also interested in other industries. Some of those things worked out well. Some of those things I think worked out less well. My baby brother is probably more wired like my dad than anyone else within our family. But he is, I would say too, he's a curious person. He's well read and but way less specialized than Kenneth and I have been in our career. But yeah.
And I guess with that as a transition into just leadership, family, maybe some of the other stories, Tim, that you could have gone to when you guys first met. Because my memories, I'm obviously 8 years younger than Tim, so I was probably in high school or middle school when I first met you, Jason. But my memories are you guys being in India together, you guys teaching and being involved at church in like a I guess it'd be called like a Sunday school class. I can't remember what they called them at Second Baptist at the time. But
yeah, so we were it's really cool because you had just gotten married. I don't know if you're a year or two into being married.
Yeah, within the first year.
And so Jason and Susanna were actually volunteering to teach a singles class, which is pretty amazing. I would say a lot of couples don't do that in their first year of marriage, but you guys did. And it was a huge blessing because you guys are such great teachers. Both you and Susanna taught the class and such great leaders. And I learned so much from you. And I became a leader in that class, and you really discipled me through that in a lot of ways. And that was really neat. We got to go to India together. I know, Tom, you guys went to Turkey together, right?
We did,
That was probably maybe 10 years later.
But that's right.
One thing that Tom and I were talking about with you that's so amazing is you've had so much success in business and such a desire to win in business, and build a solid company and great culture. But you have always been serving. I mean, if you look at your life, and we haven't always spent a ton of time together through the years, but just from a distance, seeing you involved in whether it's a seed company or these different nonprofit organizations, ministries, different churches, teaching at Sunday school a lot. I know you've taught. I don't know if you're still teaching at Sunday school, but yeah, I think you've almost always been teaching Sunday school, right? Through the years.
COVID gave me a much needed break.
Yeah. But it's so awesome to see that. And then, even getting an advanced degree now in theology. What's your degree, did you say again?
It's a Master's of Arts in Leadership, Theology, and Society from Regent College in Vancouver.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, it's a 2.5-year program. I think it was 40 hours.
That's so neat because I think so many guys who get successful in our business. And I'd love to ask you kind of what drives you because we talk a lot about in our business, our values are hungry, humble, smart. And we think that's really critical. We hire people that you have all three of those and you're kind of growing in all three of those. The hunger part, I feel like when you're young, there's so much of a sense of I got to just make some money. I got to take care of my family. You got to feed the kids and pay the bills. And then, building a reputation, getting a certain amount of money to invest. But there becomes a point where you have enough, and so you're not really working for the money or the success in the same way anymore. Maybe you're working for impact in a different way. I think the saddest things are the guys who, they have $100 million and they're trying to get to 200 million or they're trying to get to $1 billion and you see them and they're 70 years old and they're just still like, it's only about work and that's it. And it's only about just stacking up more money and they're never going to be able to spend all the money they have. But maybe kind of transitioning to talking more about your family and ministry and kind of, what drives you as a man now, because there's no question you're not taking a step back. You emailed us, I think Friday you were in Guatemala with the ministry doing something. So it's not like you're saying, hey, I'm going to kind of be working part-time, playing a lot of golf. And you're fully engaged. But maybe if you don't mind talking about kind of what drives you and that part of it,
I would say first and foremost, by the way, those memories, thinking about Tom, you in Turkey, I was at your parents' house. You were in high school. You might have been a freshman in high school. One of the early times that I spent time with your parents and Tim and your wonderful family. I would say, by the way, as a total sidebar, I think the way that you and your family did life and the time I got to be sort of at the table with your parents probably influenced the way that we raised our kids as much as anybody. It had
awesome.
A humongous impact getting to know your mom and dad so well. And so it is not surprising that they have ended up with the kids and the relationship with their kids and now their grandchildren the way that they have. So I just, I know we said that at the beginning. I've just got there's a real high level of affection for the Dosch family. So as it relates to work, My dad modeled hard work for us. You know, he came to Houston by way of the NFL. But back when he played, there was the idea of signing $100 million contract and being done for good by the time you're in your mid-30s. That was not a thing.
Yeah.
And he shared these amazing stories with me about the jobs he had in the off season, and he came from a blue collar family. And I think that practically speaking, my mom came from a more affluent background. And I think because of the view that my dad had into what was really sort of a sad family setting, with my mom's side of the family, I think my dad was sort of like, we're going to go the other direction. And so I mean, I grew up in a beautiful home with a beautiful family, but my dad never stopped modeling hard work for us, my siblings and me. And that's something I've just been always really, really thankful for. But I would pair that with also not having a memory as a kid growing up I don't have a memory as a child of not seeing my dad on his knees each evening.
Wow.
And for a kid growing up, that was very powerful for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say the combination of those two things was extremely, going back to that word, extremely foundational for how I saw work and how I saw family and how I saw walking in the fear of the Lord. And my dad, while not perfect, I think he did that really well. Both of my parents did that really well. So I'm really, really grateful for that. I would say too, if I'm just, again, I'm being completely honest with you. I think that you can enter into work and you can make up in your mind that I'm not going to allow work to be my identity.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot harder.
Oh, yeah.
That's a lot harder to do than to just talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there have to be some things in place that keep that from happening. I think starting with who you're married to, I think that that's a really big thing.
Yeah.
Because your wife will remind you every single day just how imperfect you are, but in all the appropriate ways, like in all the healthy ways. My wife has certainly been that for me, that she constantly reminds me that we need to be pressing into things that are eternal.
Yeah.
And those things are, according to Scripture, the souls of men and the Word of God. So when in doubt where to spend and invest your time, just take it back to those two things. And so I think that that's really big. And then I would say lastly, because this could be a lot longer conversation, we could unpack things. I would say I've got 4 daughters. They're 18, 16, 14, and 11. Our youngest daughter, we adopted from China. I was probably with you in Colorado on a singles retreat when we were first introduced to this idea of adopting a kid. We were having a really hard time having children.
Yeah.
We'd had multiple miscarriages. It was a really hard and lonely season and kind of dark. It was hard. And we were introduced on that trip to a family out of Chicago that was in the process of adopting their 3rd kid from China. Complete strangers. At the time, it felt like angels. And they just said, y'all ought to consider adopting. We began the process shortly after that, got written approval to adopt, and then got pregnant.
Wow.
And we had three biological kids, June of 06, June of 08, June of 10. So every other year in June, we had these, blonde-headed, blue-eyed girls. And then we got to a point where my wife said, if we're going to have another kid, this would be a good time to have it. I said, I think we know too much about the plight of these little girls in China.
Oh, yeah.
So we went back to China and we got a girl. She's been, if you want to expand the worldview of your children, bring an adoptive child into your home. I mean, that's just been an incredible thing. But all that to say is we went and got her in 2015. And we were bringing her, I just remember bringing her back into our home. And it was around that same time that I just feel like I kind of hit bottom. I hit a really rough patch. And I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that I had unknowingly allowed more of my identity to be rooted in who I was professionally than who I was in Christ. And it was eating at me and it was weighing on me. And that honestly began for me an incredible 10-year journey into really understanding God's purpose for our work, like his design for our work, the dangers, potential dangers of work, and then developing and putting together a new purpose for my work. So a lot of the things you were talking about, Tim, were real in terms of service and teaching and everything else. But God slowly, starting 10 years ago, really began to move me from this place of being sort of what I would describe as like this idealized persona to being more fully integrated, where you were actually able to receive God's grace and operate hopefully in grace and humility towards others. And it just completely changed the way that I saw our work, my work. And I'm just so thankful for that. I don't know if that would have happened without the adoption and without, the Lord like really kind of walking alongside of me through a really hard period of time. But I constantly remind myself, like, I'm just so grateful that journey started in my 40s and not in my 80s, or my 70s, or not have started it at all. Because I feel like I've experienced personally and professionally more of what God intended over the last 10 years than in the first 15 or 20 years. So I'm really grateful for that.
Yeah, it's God's grace. And I'm sure when you're going through that, and, I've been through hard times, and Tom has too, you go through these times of refining where God doesn't want to let you keep going forward the way you are. He wants to change you. And it's the biggest blessing you could ever have.
Right.
But in the moment, it can be very heavy, and it can be confusing and hard. And I was just thinking back to Mia Grace when you adopted her. I don't know if this is exactly correct, but literally the moms would bring the baby at night, right, and put them in like a drawer on the outside of the building and push the drawer in. And in the morning, someone comes in and, takes the baby from that drawer. So you just think about, just even God's providence with that. This little baby completely disconnected from you and your family and your life, over in China, and then God bringing you together, bringing her into your family as your daughter. There's so many just amazing things about that. That's so cool.
Yeah, for sure.
One thing that's
I did want to talk to you about
related, Tim, real quick,
Tom.
related to that, just because I was with Jason, we were together at that seed company event years ago in Arizona. And I think it was you or Susanna spoke about adopting Mia Grace, but then you also talked about us being adopted into the family of God. And that was so powerful. I don't know if you mind just kind of like summarizing that. If you remember, that was like 10 years ago, but I'm sure you've talked about that many times. So that was so powerful. And that connects the word of God and your passion for serving on the board as chairman of the seed company. I think that's where you were in Guatemala, right? Dedicating a Bible.
That's exactly right. Last week I was in Guatemala for a few days with a friend of mine that we had agreed 10 years ago to co-sponsor an Old Testament.
Wow.
For the Quiche group, the Quiche language group in Guatemala. And we were there for several days and got to see that. And it's something transformative to see people that have never had scripture in their mother tongue language, like actually receive it for the first time. And so it's amazing how much progress has been made, partly through technology and partly through the sacrificial love of other people, to just see like this work getting closer and closer to being wrapped up, and every one of the nearly 7,000 languages in the world having access to scripture is kind of an amazing thing. But my wife ended up writing a book. Isn't it incredible? I heard a pastor say this several years ago. It was Randy Alcorn. I remember Randy Alcorn said something. His sweet wife died just a few years ago. And I remember listening to him being interviewed by a friend of mine. And Randy said, he goes, I've reflected a lot, since his wife passed. And I got to be around him several times with her. I've never seen a man affirm and love his wife so well as him. Truly. And so it's one thing to be so out in front with your words and your writings like he is, but to see him backstage and loving and serving the way that he did really challenged me. But I remember him saying after his wife had passed, he just said, what I realize is, he goes, I started kind of making more notes once she was gone and thinking back on my life experiences. And he said, what I realize is that every great thing, just about every great thing that I've experienced in life started as something that was really hard.
Wow.
Almost everything. And that is definitely definitely true of this adoption process. And I would say for Susanna and me, we've been married almost 24 years. I would say for sure that's been the hardest thing that we had experienced is bringing an orphan into our home. There's so many things. It is an outer body experience to pull into another country, completely run down, and to just walk into a building and they thrust this kid into your hands and then you just leave. And like your life is forever changed. But what it did is it forced Susanna and me to square up on some stuff that neither one of us individually had dealt with, and a lot of it was heart related. And so we had a decision to make. And I just love. I mean, if you ever question God's timing, go through the adoption process. I mean, it's amazing just how He did things. But it's a beautiful story. My wife wrote about it in a book she wrote called Restore, and it's a beautiful story of like that process. And she tied it to our adoption as children, and the whole book sort of unpacks it, and it's centered around this idea that there are. I'll make this really quick. There's a science behind this. This isn't just scripture. There's a science behind this, and it is that our worldview and our secure attachment is, not our worldview, I should say. I would say our view of God, our view and the way that we interrelate with God, with our spouses, with future coworkers, with our own children, with friends down the street, the way that we interrelate with them is all directly related to the way that we interface with our primary caretaker in the first 18 months of our life. And so if that's true, and you've come from a situation like Mia Grace had, which was very traumatic. She was dropped off in a drop box at 3 days of age, and we picked her up and she was 17 months old. And so those 17 months, she was never held. She was never nursed. She experienced a lot of trauma. And so you have a decision to make as adoptive parents, because if you haven't dealt with things that are pretty much keeping people at bay in your life, which I had certainly been doing, then your biological kids will figure out a way to kind of get to you. But an adopted child will not do that. And they will turn and go the other direction. So we had a decision, at least relationally with her, to like square up on some of our own stuff and to make progress in those areas. And that's what we did by God's grace. And it's an amazing thing. And it definitely helped us understand better this picture of us as adopted children by God. And it also helped us to understand too that our parents, our spouses, our siblings, and our friends were never meant by God and never designed by God to meet our relational, spiritual, and emotional needs. God alone is for that.
Amen.
And so, thanks for asking that question, Tom.
It's cool because it's like, God was using you to save her, but He was using her to save you.
It's incredible.
It's like this crazy thing how God works when you follow Him and obey and you go through really hard things. It's crazy because you think, well, if I just obey God and do what He's asked me to do, it's going to be easy, right? Because I'm obeying Him. And sometimes that's the hardest thing to do, but the most valuable and meaningful thing that you can do. But I wanted to just get your thoughts also on being a girl dad.
Yeah.
Because you're probably one of the most masculine guys I know. Very masculine family. Your dad was a lineman on the Oilers.
Right.
Big guy. I know you've always been into fitness, working out, very competitive. I got to watch, I think it was your daughter Caroline, play basketball. Yeah. And it was like one of the most fun, impressive games. I think I watched like 2 or 3 of the games this tournament. And you guys just destroyed these teams. It was an 8th grade team. It was like, and these were good teams. It was like 40 to 2. I mean, you just tore the heart out of these girls on our team. Yeah. But to watch Caroline play, it reminded me of you. She was so aggressive, so good on defense, such a good shooter. She would just rip the ball out of the other team's hand and just go score. And it was awesome to see that, to see you on the sidelines as her dad. And I know that means a lot to you, but maybe I have 3 daughters. Tom has 3 daughters. Just the importance of being a girl dad. Yeah. I think there's never been a time where there's more maybe challenges for girls with social media and, the body dysmorphia stuff and messaging that's coming at our daughters and lies. I think, we desire our daughters to be strong women, and the world would have a description of what that means. and then we have a different description of like a healthy, strong woman, maybe from a godly perspective, but maybe just, so I have a almost 12-year-old, almost 9-year-old, and a 6-year-old. And Tom, yours are
8, 2, and 9 months. So mine are
yeah.
quite
So
a bit
Tom's,
younger.
yeah, they're a little bit younger, but just maybe some of the wisdoms you've learned, and I think you have such a healthy masculinity, because we also hear about toxic masculinity and all this kind of crazy stuff, but there's such a need for true masculinity, being a true man and having, like you said with your dad, this guy who's a lineman who's super tough. I think he told me one time that he was in a play and his fingers got caught in a face mask and broke all his fingers in one hand. And he was only out for one play because they just duct taped his hand, put him back in. So
great memory.
About as tough as you could be, but then he had a tender side and getting on his knees and showing that he was submitting to God. And like you said, imperfectly, all of us are imperfect. We know I'm making a ton of mistakes, and pray for God's grace on that for my kids. But just, I'd love to hear more about that with you, because you're the right kind of girl dad that we need in our culture, but maybe not the way the media would depict what we need for a girl dad.
Thank you.
And so I'd love to hear just some of your advice on that.
Yeah, thanks for that, and you have such a good memory. I can't believe it's been 20 years, and I've shared some of those stories with you, and you're like, "And this happened." I'm like, "Wow, I can't remember what I did yesterday." I would say a few things that jump out at me. Starting with this, the reality of letting your kids physically, there's something even within letting your kids physically see you on your knees. I'm a big believer that you cannot give what you're not getting. And so spiritually speaking, you cannot expect your kids to walk in the fear of the Lord, and the comfort of the Spirit, without, with you walking that way. So I'm not a believer that if you do good, you get good, but I am a big believer that you will reap what you sow. Yeah. And so to be on your knees and in God's word, and I think that is the number one. You cannot give what you're not getting, and I think that you have to model that for your children every day in real time. Number one. Number two is, I would say, practically speaking, for girls, if I grew up in a family of 3 boys. Both of my brothers and my sister's husband were professional athletes, all of them professional baseball players. My dad was a professional football player. So there's a lot of sports, a lot of hunting, a lot of those are the things that we were growing up and around when I was a kid. But I will tell you, for me, I think, and I tell dads this all the time, especially dads with girls, is if you want to raise confident girls, and I do, practically speaking, I want to raise confident kids. I want their confidence to be in the right things. Mm-hmm. But if you want to raise confident kids, to me, it starts with one very simple thing: love and honor your wife well. Love and honor your wife well. If you do that one thing, your kids have a very good chance of being confident. And I think confidence flows into lots of areas, really important areas. I would say number 3 would be this tendency, I think, especially with older generation, to where the dads maybe are quite a little bit less hands-on with the girls, when the mom's a little bit more hands-on. When you're a dad with 4 girls, you have no choice but to loop them into what you're doing. And so sharing something like that with, maybe your wife's not sharing with them. For us, it's been hunting, and it's been live music, and it's been, a lot of time, anything almost outdoors. We love to camp and hike, and we love those things. And we love it, but you also have to lean into the things that she's interested in. I mean, my oldest daughter is getting ready to be a freshman in college, and we've had so many fun adventures together and stuff I never would have chosen to do if she weren't interested in it. And I think that that's drawn us closer together. I think that that's really important. And then I would say too, this is something I tell dads all the time. I mean, loving your wife well, and, pulling them into what you're doing, getting them interested in what you're doing. But I think the other big thing too, especially now having 3 teenagers, is pushing back on the narrative that when a girl becomes a teenager, you want to ship them off. I have heard that from more Bible-believing, God-fearing men than I could possibly add up, especially when my kids were younger, where they would say, girls are great, but once they become teenagers, you'll want to get out. You'll either want to get them out of the house, or you'll want to get out of the house. Yeah. And you have to push back on that. because there is not a more formative or important time for you to be in the life of your daughter than in those years. That's what I've discovered by having 3 teenagers at home right now. And so that's a big, those would be just some simple practical things. The last thing I would add, I just thought of this, and I was almost said this at the beginning, but you know, if you think about it, you guys grew up in the church. When I was growing up, I mean, there was an offering plate that was passed down each row. And every single week I was sandwiched between my mom and my dad. And I got to watch my dad put an envelope in the tray. Things have changed now, where everything's done through electronic transfers, you know, or just kind of one off. They don't pass the plate like they used to. They don't do that. At least they don't at the church I attend. And I think there's something too, at a much younger age than you think, in looping your daughters into what you're doing from a generosity standpoint. It kind of goes back to that whole idea of like, you can't give what you're not getting. And I don't think that we can expect them to grow up being generous people, caring for the nations and other people, and even people within their own community, if they don't see us doing that. And because of the way that underwriting is done at churches, like tithing is done at churches, I think that's something we need to do a better job of modeling.
One thing that would really encourage us, we went to Colombia twice this last year with Conviventia, and which is a great ministry down in Colombia that's working with kids. And, you know, my wife and I have been on mission trips to Africa, I've been to India, you know, and those are such impactful trips. We wanted our kids to experience that because we live in this bubble. Our kids go to Second Baptist. It's a very affluent school, a lot of money. And that's just like the way they see the world, is this little, you know, bubble of people that just have everything. And taking them down there was so unbelievable for them, just for their kind of formation as young people. And they love it. So we were talking about like this summer, like where are we going to go? We're going to go visit my sister Amy in Europe. So we're going to go to, you know, do a little Europe trip. And they're like, we'll do whatever you guys want us to do, but we have to go back to Colombia. And they're like, they're like, that was our favorite trip. And we, you know, getting to work with those kids, getting to see God working, and then talking about the generosity. And my son Luke just got his first job at Island Grill. He just turned 14. He went in there and got a job. And he was like, I'm so excited to be able to give to help buy basketball hoops, you know, for the kids down there, because he got to go play down there and, you know, play with the kids. But I think you're so right. Getting them a different perspective than we have, just living our little bubble, which is so toxic in so many ways. And it's, you know, everybody has this, has a phone when they're 8 years old, and they're going and doing this or that. And not that all that stuff is necessarily bad, but it's so materialistic, and it's so much of what this person has and what that person has and this experience, and not seeing, you know, God moving and working in the lives of people that are just couldn't be more different. We did a kids camp in Conviventia as a family, and the families that came were day workers who make $5 a day. You know, so you have these little kids who are going to the school, their parents make $5 a day, and getting to, you know, have times of testimonies and sharing with them our story, hearing their story, loving on them. It was just so powerful, and it just puts that kind of seed in your kid's heart of like, I want, like Savannah's like, I want to be a missionary now. This is incredible. And so I think that's so critical. And Tom, we've read that book. Was it called Strong Fathers, Strong Daughters?
Yeah, that was, I have to shout out Jarrett Vinghouse on that, because he told me about that book years ago, and then I finally read it, and that's one of those books that definitely presents the sad doom and gloom of our culture, and just the stats are so negative. And like you said, Tim, at the beginning, just we need to be strong dads for our daughters, present. I've heard that so much, Jason, because I have 2 little boys that are crazy. You know, the boys compared to the girls, it's like the girls just sit in the corner and read in color, and it's like the easiest thing ever. And then the boys are just like putting holes in the wall and, you know, practically killing themselves and each other constantly. And everyone's always like, well, just wait. The boys will be easy later. The girls are going to be so difficult, so hard. I hear it I don't think there's been a conversation where that hasn't been said. And so I love what you said, and what I've heard and what they say in that book is press in as a dad as your girls get older. And my girls aren't to that age yet, but keep hugging them. You know, even when it's awkward, like keep pursuing them. They're going to push back on intentionally. They want you to fight for them. They want to see you fight for them. They want to see you engage with them, just because they're pushing back doesn't mean that you should just walk out of the room. So
That's right.
thanks for sharing that, because I think that's just good encouragement, because we're not hearing that at all in the culture, even in the, like you said, even in the kind of the church world.
Yeah.
One of the biggest questions I think our kids ask themselves, and I think even the enemy can cause problems with this, is, does my dad love me? You know, and I think especially for our daughters, does my dad love me? And I think you're right, Tom, when you go through that time where there are a lot of changes going on, there's a lot of pressure, there's peer pressure, there's big decisions being made, and your daughter, if there is some pushback, she wants you to fight for her and engage in that pushback in a constructive way, in a healthy way, and really work through those things with her and process through those things and be okay if sometimes she's upset or she's mad or whatever. You know, you have this perspective that is so different because you've lived so many more decades than she has, and you're seeing the full picture. And there's a battle for our daughters. I mean, it's unbelievable the destruction that you can face and the decisions you make and how that can impact. And obviously God has grace and God restores so often, but there's so much hurt that can happen if the dad is not present. And we even talk about that just with the people we hire in our business, how you can a lot of times see the lack of a father figure. And especially in men, the brokenness that you'll see in a man, it's very hard for people. I mean, and again, God can do work and he can restore, but there's sometimes the underlying problem in a business situation is nothing to do with the situation, the company, or the split structure, all that stuff. It's that he needs the affirmation that he didn't get from his dad, and he's trying to get it in a way that he really can never get it.
Yep. And
he's just striving for it. And then at the flip side, the healthiest people, they can be humble and can be others focused and team focused, have that affirmation. They have the identity, and they're like, I want to see other people win, and I want to win too. But there's just this, it's a difference. And so it's so critical, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
So,
for sure.
I was going to ask, Jason,
go ahead.
You
Yeah,
have
Tom.
so much going on. We were reading your biography, and it's pretty incredible. Just, I mean, you just finished your master's, you have 4 daughters, you're doing so much constantly. And you and I had this conversation years ago. You did strategic coach a number of years ago. Tim and I both did the master's program. Like, you know, just these, and I think both those programs are based on biblical principles. You know, obviously the master's program very outwardly is, but you know, there's these principles that God has established that we can follow. And there's a lot we can do, but it also means saying no to a lot of things. And so just for you in your life, with what you and Susanna are trying to accomplish, with the way you're trying to, you know, raise your family, spend time together as a couple, like what's some advice around creating margin where you can, you know, be successful in these different areas, but ultimately, you know, have your priorities in the right place?
Man, I feel like that has become my favorite word. I think you could call my wife right now and say, what's the word Jason talks about the most often? And I think it's the word margin. A pastor friend of mine said to me years ago, and I think this was really kind of the jumping off point for me with what you're talking about now. And he made a comment. He said, if you have no margin in your hearing, if you have no margin in your calendar, if you have no margin in your relationships, if you have no margin in your finances, how, when, and where do you expect the Holy Spirit to move?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how does that work? And that was so challenging to me because when he shared that over a decade ago, I would say I had a lot less margin than I do now, when you would think that I would be even busier and my calendar would be more full with 3 teenage daughters and 4 kids and a wife and, you know, with everything that's going on. And I think that you have to build those things in. And I think you have to understand that a constant for all of us is a fixed amount of time. And in terms of like the day, and with every yes to one thing, it means a no to something else. And it's kind of, I think it was Louis Giglio that said that years ago. He's like, make sure that your yes is worth the less.
Yeah.
And so just weighing those things, I think it is also about not just listening to how you're feeling, listening carefully to your wife and the health and like what's going on in your family. I mean, biblically speaking, I mean, I think Paul said to Timothy, he's like, if you want to understand what kind of leader a person is, you just look at their children, look at their wives. And I think that there is so much that's true about that. So just practically speaking, I would tell you that we do build that in. I mean, we really are intentional about that. And where it starts for us, going back to like teenagers and screens, is what I do personally is I go an hour a day a week, and a week a year with no phone. And I just think there is something about that that is like super healthy.
Wow.
I do not think this is me. I'm not trying to be too rigid, but I don't think the first thing that we need to be grabbing is our phone in the morning. And I think that we need to build in that margin to, the ear, biblically, the ear is the organ of obedience. And so like what I'm listening to and what I'm focusing my eyes on. And the truth is, I had told my second oldest daughter this last week. I'm like, what your eyes are focused on is where your heart will go. It just is. And so we cannot expect our kids to build in margin or to focus on God's word or on the giving other people the attention if we're not doing it ourselves, right? You can't give what you're not getting.
Yeah.
And I think that also comes with margin. Your kids have got to see it in your own life. And I think also going back to the thing we talked about early, which was just culture in a company, I think that your coworkers need to see that in your life too. And not just like gritting it out and being like, I'm going to be steady, I'm going to be calm. But I think that there is this thing, again, what your eyes are focused on, your heart will follow. And when you build in margin and are focusing your attention on things that are eternal, I think everything falls into place. It's like C.S. Lewis says, when we focus on first things, we get first things and second things. But when we focus on secondary things, you don't get either.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm paraphrasing that, but I think that is true. And I think it's now more important than ever. And not just for our children and wives, but I think for people in whom we work with and are in community with outside of work. They have to see that. And that's really good. I was going to ask you, do you have any questions for us or thoughts, anything you wanted to add? We're probably getting somewhat close to closing, so just anything that was. Oh man, I think a lot of my questions when I don't know even if Tom knows this. I reached out to David and Tim here locally and just said, can I come over and just learn more about what you guys are doing? It is amazing to me. The progress that you guys have made with y'all's brand, not just in greater Houston and outside of our state, but also in Dallas-Fort Worth, Tom, and what you've done, which to me feels like you guys have taken that market over by storm. And again, I really mean that. I just am really impressed with what you guys have created. I think it's incredible, the team that you've built. I think I had lunch with one of your guys yesterday. I had lunch with William yesterday.
Oh, good. Yeah.
And
such a great guy.
Just an incredible person. And just listening to him talk about culture and working here and how much he's loved it. So I keep up with you guys and am just really impressed with what you've created. I don't think there's any question you guys are the market leader when it comes to both buyer rep and seller rep on the land side. And I wouldn't dream of buying a parcel of land without talking to you guys. But I think way more than that, maybe in conjunction with that, I think the reputation you've built. It takes a lifetime. It feels like a lifetime to build a reputation. It takes moments to destroy it.
Yeah.
And you guys have so consistently, you're very well thought of among your peers and guys who are even ahead of you, like in their careers. And it's just been a huge blessing to see that, because it's honoring to your families, it's honoring to the Lord, it's honoring to the people you work with. And it's just really been a blessing for me to watch. So
well, I appreciate it. It's very kind of you, Jason. I was going to say, you really impacted me early on when we were first talking and I was trying to get in the business. And you said, the first thing I can tell you is so many young guys get in and it's like, how fast can I make as much money as I can make? Yeah. And they don't worry about the reputation. And they may even go to a company where the reputation isn't great of some of the people or the leadership. And you said, hey, even if you're doing the right thing, but there's people around you that aren't, you kind of get colored with that. And you said, man, I just can't tell you enough. Don't worry about the money. Worry about reputation, learning the business, providing a really good service, and the money's going to follow. And I think we've tried to model that, and not focusing on the fees or whatever, but trying to treat people right, treat our clients right, and then do the right thing as much as we can. And I think it's so valuable, and I think that's what we all hope for. More than like you get to the end of your career and it's like, oh, they made a lot of money or something. It's like they had a great reputation. They were honorable guys. They had integrity, and going through decades, like you're saying, you see people that they do it right for a while and then they fall off. And it's really sad. And the idea of finishing well, like finishing well is so important. One question I have for you is just what advice you give to young people, maybe who are wanting to get into business. We have a lot of young people that are in college or that are like in the real estate program at A&M, they're listening, or maybe they're out of school and they're thinking, this real estate thing sounds really fun. Seems like a great career, can make a lot of money. Yeah. What kind of advice would you give them? And I remember going back when I was trying to get in, and I sat down with you, and I had no idea. Your first question is, well, what kind of real estate do you want to do? And I was like, I don't even really know. I just know I want to be in it. I think I want to do retail because you do retail. And it seems good, but you gave me some great advice back then that just really encouraged me. And I think so much of our growth, just me and my career, and then as we've grown the team and the company, is been off things that you've said and advice that you've given us. It's really been impactful.
Thanks, man. Yeah. It's been a great industry to be in. Obviously, it's been a great city and a great state to be in for sure. I think it starts with talking to people who are in the industry that know you well. You can probably find some, and asking them what they think your unique ability is. I don't think enough people are doing that. Young people are doing that. I think that there are people that get focused on the type of money you can make without trying to understand better. Do I have not even the skill set, but is what I'm being asked to do by getting into this industry, does it excite me and does it fit around the way that I've been hardwired by God? Yeah. And I don't think young people are asking that question or being asked that question enough. Number two is I think that there's things about getting into this business that are harder than ever, and really growing in this business, I think, can be challenging. And so I think it's also developing a realistic expectation of what it's going to entail in that timeline, right? So if I were talking to a young person, we actually, each summer over the last 3 years, every summer, I'm sure you guys experience this, Tom and Tim, we get asked about internships. And because of funny summer schedules and because of young people that we already have in our office that are doing some of the work that an intern might do, we don't want to bring someone on and not be able to give them the attention that they need. And so what we've done the last 3 summers is we've held a real estate camp, and with up to 10 candidates. These are either kids that are in high school or in college. And what we'll do is we'll allow them to come in. It's for a full week, and it'll go from 9 to like 1. And we want to expose them to as much as possible that happens in our real estate space. So they'll have an opportunity to meet with a retailer. They'll have an opportunity to walk a construction site. They'll have an opportunity to review a loan document.
That's cool.
So we want to, and our hope is, and I think it's actually been effective, is that we've been able to give kids at least a clear insight into like what that looks like. I think that for the most part, particularly for someone who is humble and operates with a hat in hand sort of personality, I think there are other people in our industry that are willing to meet, maybe not for a week, but I'm saying meet and just discuss that. And I would say to a young person looking to get into business, meet with as many people as possible in the different segments of the industry to land on where you feel like you fit best. And then lastly, I would say, going back to strategic coach, Dan Sullivan was my coach, and he wrote all that material. And Dan Sullivan, I remember him saying, it was one of the best things that first year. He's like, whether you are young or whether you are old, constantly be practicing the referability habits. Those being show up on time, say please and thank you, do what you say you're going to do, and finish what you start. Yeah. And I just find so few people that actually do those things. Those are simple things, but really they're simple but complex and hard, if that makes sense. They're simply straightforward, but it's I don't see people practicing that a lot. Like, do what you say you're going to do or finish what you've started. That's just not happening a lot.
Almost nobody does that. And I think if you think of a broker, if you can just do those things, a lot of times the market will take care of, the asset. Sometimes, because people think sometimes we're like a magician or something, we can create something. All we're doing is exposing something to the market and, using relationships. And there's obviously value in that. But if you have those habits you're talking about, you're going to have really good long-term client relationships and build trust with them, because it's hard to build trust with someone when you can't trust their word, if they're going to show up or if they're going to finish something or whatever. So, but those are also hard. especially when you get busy and you're doing a lot of different things, juggling different things.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's good.
Well, Jason, thank you so much for coming on and all this time. I think you've been a mentor to both of us, and we named the conference room that you're sitting in there in Houston, the Baker, in your honor 8 years ago when we started the company. So you mean a lot to us, you and your family, and it's neat. I mean, you officiated the weddings for 2 of our sisters. We've traveled internationally, all the things we've talked about. We could probably do this for a couple more hours and go longer than Rogan even does on one of his podcasts. But this has been a lot of fun. We were both really looking forward to having you on, and I'm excited for our audience and our employees to get to listen to this. I know Jackie, my wife, is going to have a lot of fun getting to listen to this. So thanks for being willing to do this.
Absolutely. Thanks for including me. Please tell Jackie hi, and hope I get to connect with you in person now that you're up in DFW. Hope I get to do that soon. But respect you guys a ton, care about you guys a lot, and it's been a fun 20 years of getting to know you guys, and I'm just really grateful for being included. Thanks a lot.
Well, thanks, Jason. Really appreciate everything you shared. You shared some great things. I was thinking as you were talking, I was like, I need to go back through and listen to this and take some notes, because there are some really good things that I want to think about in my life to apply. So I appreciate you sharing all that.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. You guys are awesome.
Thank you for listening to our podcast today. If you have questions about land you own in Texas, send us an email at texaslandguys@dmre.com and follow us on LinkedIn to stay updated.